They tell you silos are a communication problem. They are not. They are a trust problem, a fear problem, and sometimes a survival problem wearing a neat corporate jacket. Because most silos do not begin with politics. They begin with pressure. A few people solve something hard. They survive the chaos together. They become the ones who know, the ones who remember, the ones who can decode the mess when everybody else is squinting at the wall. And that shared victory creates something powerful: trust, speed, instinct, belonging. But if nobody is careful, that same bond becomes a border. What was once a great team becomes a closed loop. What was once hard-won expertise becomes guarded territory. What was once trust becomes tribalism. Amy Edmondson explains that breaking silos is hard because people naturally default to the relationships closest to their own work, and because trying to solve the issue with big restructures is often costly, confusing, and slow. Her solution is more practical. Make the interfaces between teams work better. In plain language, do not just redraw the map. Fix the bridges. That is the part so many organizations get wrong. They keep moving the boxes. They keep changing the labels. They keep announcing transformation like it is some sacred ritual. But if fear stays the same, if trust stays low, if the same people still hold all the context, then nothing really changes. You just get the same silo with a fresh coat of paint and a new slide deck. And people feel it. You can walk into a team and sense it in seconds. They have their own language, their own gravity, their own invisible history. They are not rude. They do not have to be. Exclusion does not always shout. Sometimes it just quietly fails to make room for you. Now multiply that across an organization. One group knows the systems, one group knows the politics, one group knows the customers, one group knows how to get funding, one group knows where the bodies are buried, metaphorically speaking, hopefully. And suddenly, the company is not one company. It is a set of fortified islands connected by weak ferry service and passive-aggressive calendar invites. Margaret Heffernan makes the deeper point. Strong organizations are not built around stars. They are built on social capital, trust, reciprocity, and the kind of human connection that lets people think well together. She argues that teams become smarter when more people contribute and feel safe enough to speak candidly. Simplified, brilliance does not scale if belonging does not. That line matters more than most leaders realize. Because when belonging narrows, intelligence narrows. When intelligence narrows, decisions narrow. And when decisions narrow, the company starts making expensive mistakes with a perfectly straight face. This is how culture breaks without sounding broken. People stop asking, what does the whole organization need? And once that shift happens, collaboration turns into theater. The meetings still happen, the workshops still happen, the values posters still happen, but the honesty starts thinning out like cheap soup. Rosabeth Moss Kanter has long argued for a win-win mindset and for organizations that combine economic and social purpose instead of treating business like a zero-sum cage match. In practical terms, if teams believe that helping another group succeed somehow weakens their own position, then the company is already in trouble. It may still have a logo, but internally it is becoming a collection of rival camps with shared stationery. And then comes the accelerant, constant restructuring. This is where things get dangerous. Because many organizations no longer use restructuring as a design tool, they use it as a ritual of subtraction. They say agility, people hear layoffs. They say efficiency. People hear more work for fewer humans. They say reset. And after enough cycles, employees start learning the wrong lesson. They learn that the safest thing is not to care too much, not to share too much, not to mentor too widely, not to build too deeply. Because deep investment starts to feel risky in a place where change so often means disposal. Recent workplace research shows that continuous restructuring and layoffs erode trust, fuel change fatigue, reduce discretionary effort, and push employees to disengage from long-term initiatives. Gallup's recent workplace reporting also found employee engagement fell in 2024, with large productivity costs attached to disengagement. In simple terms, when people feel disposable, they do not become more collaborative. They become careful. And careful is not the same as committed. Careful people protect themselves. Committed people build. Careful people avoid risk. Committed people improve systems. Careful people survive the quarter. Committed people invest in the future. That is why restructuring must stop automatically meaning reduction, because every time a company treats people as expendable, it teaches everyone left behind to hold back some part of themselves. Maybe their trust, maybe their energy, maybe their initiative, maybe their hope. And once hope becomes rationed, collaboration is living on borrowed time. So what actually works? First, stop treating the org chart like a holy relic. Amy Edmondson's work points to a better path. Focus on the interfaces. Focus on where teams depend on each other, misunderstand each other, hand work to each other, or quietly blame each other. That is where culture becomes real, not in the executive diagram, in the seams. A practical example is simple. Do two teams have separate metrics that quietly punish cooperation? Fix that. Do only a few veterans ever get invited into the real problem solving? Open that up. Are there people who translate between departments and keep the place functioning but never get rewarded because they are not flashy? Promote them, protect them. Clone the pattern if you can. Because the bridge builders are often carrying the company on their backs while the spotlight is pointed somewhere else. Second, rebuild trust as if it were infrastructure, because it is. Margaret Heffernan's insight is that people do better work when they know each other, trust each other, and feel safe enough to disagree honestly. So if every meeting is dominated by the same voices, do not call that collaboration. If every review meeting feels like a trial with better stationery, do not call that learning. If newcomers are expected to earn the right to be heard long after they were hired, do not call that culture. Third, build win-win incentives on purpose. Kanter's work is a warning against narrow departmental thinking and a case for shared value. If one team is rewarded for speed, another for risk avoidance, and another for cost cutting, you have not created balance. You have created three weather systems trying to kill each other. Leaders have to align goals so helping the whole is not seen as betraying the part. Fourth, make change mean investment. Redeploy people, retrain people, reskill people, rotate them into new areas. Show the workforce that adaptation does not always arrive with a cardboard box and a security escort. Because once employees believe that every transformation initiative is just downsizing in a more expensive font, they will stop giving change the very thing it needs most: belief. And finally, leadership has to grow up. Linda Hill argues that modern leadership is about creating the conditions where innovation and collaboration can emerge across boundaries, not about one genius at the top having all the answers. That means the job of leadership is not to be the hero in the center of the story. It is to build an environment where more people can matter, more ideas can meet, and more expertise can travel. So the real questions leaders should ask are not decorative questions. Who is left out of the room? Where is knowledge getting trapped? Which teams only talk when something is already on fire? Who keeps translating across boundaries with no recognition? What have people learned it is safer not to say? Those are the questions that tell you whether a company is becoming cohesive or quietly coming apart. Because here is the truth. Most organizations do not fail because they lack smart people. They fail because smart people get cornered into silos, into fear, into habits of self-protection, into cultures where survival beats stewardship. But that is not destiny. It can be reversed. A better company is not one where everybody thinks the same. It is one where different people can work toward the same future. It is one where expertise is shared without losing status, where experienced teams become mentors instead of gatekeepers, where restructuring means renewal instead of removal, where trust is treated as an asset, not an afterthought, where collaboration is not begged for at the end of a town hall, but built into the way the place actually works. That is the real shift. Not fewer people, not tighter fear, not prettier charts, better bridges, better trust, better incentives, better reasons to care. And when that happens, something extraordinary returns. People stop guarding turf and start building roads. They stop surviving the organization and start shaping it. They stop asking, how do I protect my corner? And start asking, how do we make this place stronger together? That is how silos lose their grip. That is how culture gets its pulse back. And that is how a company stops acting like a group of disconnected victories and becomes something bigger than any one team, any one clique, or any one heroic project could ever build alone.